You've got a savings account you're quietly proud of. $41,000 built one paycheck at a time, sitting there like proof that you did something right. You check it sometimes just to feel the number. Responsible, safe, yours, now meet Grace. Same company as you, same job title, same $52,000 salary, 2 floors up in the same apartment building. She started saving the exact same month you did 10 years ago. Her account today isn't at 41,000, it's at just over 300,000. Same paycheck, same decade, same habit of putting money aside. She didn't inherit anything, didn't get a raise you didn't pick some magic stock. She did exactly one thing differently on one specific afternoon, and it had nothing to do with earning more. Here's the uncomfortable part. Saving isn't the finish line. It's the on-ramp, and almost nobody merges. My name is Nick, and today I'm showing you exactly how Grace merged, step by step. Leave a like, and let's start. Let's begin with the thing nobody wants to hear. Saving money on its own is a slow way to get poorer, not broke. Just quietly, politely poorer, 1 year at a time, in a way you don't feel until it's already happened. Here's the math. $1 you saved back in the year 2000 buys you about 51 cents of actual stuff today. Half of it evaporated. Not because someone stole it, not because you spent it, but because prices climbed every single year while your dollar just sat there, proud of itself, not moving. That's what inflation does. It's a tax nobody votes for and everybody pays. And cash is the one thing in your financial life that is guaranteed, mathematically guaranteed, to lose to it. Now, people hear this and say, sure, but my savings account pays interest. And it does. The best high-yield savings accounts right now pay somewhere around 4%, which honestly isn't bad. The problem is that inflation has been running around 4% too. So on a good day, you're treading water, and on a normal day, you're slowly sinking while a little number tells you you're fine. This is the trap of cash. It feels safe because the number never drops. You open the app, it says the same thing or a little more, and your brain files it under responsible adult. But safe and shrinking are not the same thing. Your money is technically employed, it's just calling in sick every single day and still expecting to get paid. The wealthy figured this out a long time ago. And their response wasn't to save harder, it was to stop letting money sit still. Because here's the part that reframes everything. For the rich, cash isn't a destination, it's a waiting room. Every dollar that lands in it has somewhere else it's supposed to go. So let's actually look at what the wealthy do with their money, because the data here is genuinely startling. When you break down where different Americans keep their wealth, a pattern jumps out immediately. The bottom half of the country by net worth keeps most of what they own in two things: their home and their car, real estate, and a depreciating vehicle. That's the portfolio. Stocks and investments barely register. Now look at the top 1%. Their money sits in completely different places. Business ownership, stocks, index funds, real estate that generates income, and cash. The wealthiest households keep roughly 2% of their wealth in cash. 2%. Everything else is out working. Sit with that contrast for a second, because it's the whole video in one image. The average family's biggest asset is a car that's worth less every time they start the engine. The wealthy family's biggest assets are things that grow while they sleep, and it compounds into something almost hard to believe. The top 10% of American households own roughly 90% of all the stock in the country, not 90% of their own stock, 90% of all of it. So every time you hear the market hit a record high on the news, understand who's actually catching most of that money. It isn't landing evenly, it's raining almost entirely on the people who own the assets, which is exactly why owning them, even a small slice, even late, matters more than almost anything else you'll do with money. And here I have to be honest, because this channel doesn't do fairy tales. Part of that gap isn't about knowledge. It's about surplus, and we'll come back to that hard before the end because it's the piece most of these videos conveniently skip. But part of it is simply this. The rich have a system for what happens to a dollar after it's earned. Most people don't. They earn, they spend what they spend, and whatever survives piles up in a checking account like laundry. No plan, it just accumulates. The wealthy plan for it. And the plan itself isn't a secret, and it isn't complicated. It's a sequence, and I'm going to give you the whole thing in order, starting now. Step 1 is the line, the single most important line in your financial life. And to see what happens on each side of it, let's give that $41,000 saver from the start a name. Call him Greg. Greg is you if you never cross the line. Grace is you if you do. Same salary, same apartment, same 10 years. One of them crossed. Let's watch where the line actually is. The line is your emergency fund. The rule most people know is 3 to 6 months of expenses kept in cash, somewhere safe and boring, so that a broken transmission or a lost job doesn't detonate your life. That part you've heard. But here's what nobody explains. The wealthy don't treat that number as a savings goal, they treat it as a border. Everything up to that line stays in cash because its job is safety. Everything past that line is not allowed to sit in cash because its job is growth. The moment they hit that number, the overflow gets deployed, automatically without a meeting, without feeling brave. So picture your own number. Whatever 3 to 6 months of your life costs, that's your line. Every dollar you own above it right now is a dollar that's currently sitting in the waiting room forgetting it has a job. That was Grace's one specific afternoon. 10 years ago, once she had a few months of expenses saved, she sat down for about 20 minutes and set up an automatic transfer that moved everything above that cushion straight into investments every single month before she could touch it. That's it. That's the whole move. She turned her overflow into a river instead of a puddle. Greg hit the same cushion around the same time, and then he just kept saving into the same account. The money piled up right at the edge of the line and never crossed it. 10 years later, that habit cost him around $260,000 for the crime of doing nothing, on purpose, very responsibly. That's the line. Most people spend their whole lives building up to it and then camping on it. The wealthy touch it and immediately push everything else over the edge. Okay, but push it where exactly? This is step 2, and it's the part that actually makes people rich without them feeling clever. It's the order of operations. Because not all investing dollars are equal. Some of them, before they grow a single percent, are already worth 50 to 100% more than the day you earned them. I'll explain that insane sentence. And keep one thing in your back pocket for step 4, because there's a single number hiding in there that quietly decides whether you retire comfortable or retire with an extra house. Most people never even see it. The first place your overflow should go, if you have it available, is a workplace retirement match. If your job offers to match, say. The first 4 or 5% you put into your retirement account, that is not a benefit. That is a coupon for free money that expires every year you don't use it. You put in $1, they hand you $1. You just earned a 100% return before the market did anything at all. Turning that down is the financial equivalent of leaving a paycheck in the office fridge. After the match, you handle any genuinely toxic debt, the credit card kind charging you 20-something%, because paying that off is a guaranteed return no investment can promise. Then you fill accounts that the tax system actually likes. And here's a quiet one most people miss entirely. If you're on the right kind of health plan, there's an account that lets money go in untaxed, grow untaxed, and come out untaxed. It is the only place in the entire tax code where that triple happens. The wealthy treat it like a stealth retirement account. Most people treat it like a place to store $40 for glasses. And if all of that ordering sounds like a lot to keep straight, good, because the real weapon was never the sequence. It's what makes you never have to think about the sequence again. Automation, this is step 3, and it is quietly the most powerful thing in this entire video. Here's the proof. When companies make people opt into their retirement plan, meaning you have to choose it, sign up, take action, about 64% of people participate. When companies flip it and automatically enroll everyone, so investing is the default and you'd have to opt out, participation jumps to 94%. Same people, same paychecks, same discipline. The only thing that changed was whether the money moved on its own. That gap, 64 to 94, is the difference between how we imagine wealth is built and how it's actually built. We picture discipline and monk like restraint at the grocery store. But the consistent don't rely on any of that. They rely on defaults, moving the money automatically the day after payday, so investing happens before their brain gets a vote. Think about your own month. Willpower at the end of a long day, staring at a checkout screen, loses. Willpower always loses eventually. Because it's a finite resource and the world is designed to drain it. So you take yourself out of the equation, you automate the transfer, and then your own laziness starts working for you instead of against you. It's the only time in life being lazy makes you richer. And automation protects you from something even sneakier than overspending, which is yourself in a panic. There's a long-running study that tracks how the average investor actually performs versus the funds they're invested in, and year after year, the average investor earns less than the very thing they own. Read that twice. They underperform their own investments. How is that even possible? Because they get scared when the market drops and sell at the bottom. Then get excited when it's high and buy back in at the top. They do the exact opposite of the plan at the exact worst moments. Automation quietly fixes this too because a scheduled transfer doesn't panic. It doesn't read the news. It just keeps buying calmly while you lose your mind. Which brings us to the last piece of the machine and the one number that quietly eats fortunes. Step 4. You've crossed the line, you've got the order right, you've automated it. So what does the money actually buy when it lands? And this is where people overcomplicate themselves into paralysis. They think investing means picking stocks, reading charts, predicting the next big thing. It doesn't. For you, investing means buying one boring thing, a low-cost index fund. One single fund that quietly buys you a slice of 500 of the biggest companies in America all at once. You're not betting on a company. You're not trying to be smart. You're just buying the whole board and betting that the economy, on the whole, keeps growing, which over any long stretch of history it always has. But here's the trap on this step, and it's a sneaky one because it's dressed up as sophistication. Fees, remember that number I told you to keep in your back pocket? This is it. Watch what 1% does. Say you invest $10,000 and leave it for 30 years. Put it in a cheap index fund charging basically nothing, and compare it to a fancy managed fund charging 1% a year. That 1% doesn't sound like much, but over 30 years, that tiny fee quietly eats around $40,000 of your future money on a single $10,000 investment. The fee is bigger than the amount you started with. And you'd assume you're paying for something better, right? Higher fee, smarter people, better returns. Except the data says the opposite. Over any long period, the overwhelming majority of those expensive professional managers fail to beat the plain, cheap index they're being paid to outsmart. You are paying a premium for a product that usually underperforms the free version. It's like hiring a personal chef who mostly reheats worse versions of the same frozen meal you could have bought yourself. The wealthy know this. So they buy the cheap index and keep the fee. And that fee they keep over a lifetime is worth a small house. Now, there's one more gear the truly rich use. You don't need it, but understanding it explains everything. When a wealthy person needs cash, they often don't sell their investments because selling means stepping off the compounding train and handing the government a chunk in taxes. Instead, they borrow against what they own. The assets stay invested and still growing while they spend the borrowed money. Their portfolio never stops working. Compare that to how most people get cash in a pinch, they sell something, or worse, they raid the retirement account they spent years building. One group borrows against the machine and keeps it running. The other takes a wrench to it, sells it for parts, and then wonders why the money stopped growing. You don't have to play their game, you just have to stop taking a wrench to your own machine every time life gets expensive. Alright, you've got the whole machine now. The line, the order, the automation, the cheap fund. Which brings us to the reason any of this matters. The engine that turns these boring steps into actual wealth. Compounding, and specifically, why it feels like a scam right up until it doesn't. Here's the honest truth about compounding. For years, it looks broken. You invest, you check the balance, and it's crawling. This is exactly where Greg would have bailed even if he had crossed the line, because the early days are genuinely unimpressive. But compounding isn't addition, it's acceleration. Your money makes money, and then that money makes money, and the curve doesn't rise in a straight line, it bends upward slowly at first and then violently. It's the world's slowest magic trick. You're bored for what feels like forever, and then the last part happens so fast it looks like someone cheated. Let me make it real. Say you invest $500 a month at a normal long-term return of about 7% after inflation. After 10 years, you've got around $86,000. Feels slow, but keep going. After 20 years, $260,000. After 30, over $600,000. After 40 years, north of $1.2 million. From $500 a month. The last decade alone adds more than the first 20 combined, because by then it's not your contributions doing the work, it's the growth on the growth. This is exactly the part Grace quietly lived. For the first few years, her invested account barely pulled ahead of Greg's savings, close enough that he felt a little smug about it. Then, somewhere around year 7, the gap started widening every single month. By year 10, the growth alone was adding more than she was even putting in. Same paycheck as Greg, same decade. She just crossed the line early and let the acceleration do the entire second half of the work. Which is why the single most expensive mistake isn't picking the wrong fund. It's waiting. Watch this. 2 people invest $500 a month at 7%. One starts at 25, the other waits until 35. Same amount, same return, both stop at 65. The one who started at 25 ends with around 1.37 million. The one who waited 10 years ends with about 740,000. Now here's how to actually feel that number. The 10-year delay didn't cost $60,000 in skip deposits, it cost $700,000 in future money that simply never got the chance to exist. Those dollars weren't spent, they were never born. That's what waiting really is, not a smaller pile, but a graveyard of money that never got to grow up. So the machine is simple. Cross the line, order your dollars, automate it, buy the cheap fund, then wait longer than feels reasonable. That's it. That's how saving becomes investing and how investing becomes wealth. But I promised you honesty, and here's the part these videos almost always leave out. You cannot invest a surplus you don't have. And right now, a huge share of people don't have one. Around 59% of Americans can't cover a surprise $1,000 expense from savings. More than half report living paycheck to paycheck. When your money runs out before the month does, just automate your investing isn't advice, it's a joke told at your expense. So let's be clear about what's really going on. The wealthy have 2 advantages, not 1. The first is that they have surplus to deploy. That advantage is real, it's structural, and no 10-minute video is going to hand it to you. Wages, cost of living, the whole tilted board, that's a systemic problem, and pretending it's just about your latte was always a lie. But the second advantage is the system itself. The line, the order, the automation, the cheap fund, the patience. And that one is not locked behind a paywall or a bloodline. That one is just information, and I've now handed you all of it. For the millions of people who do have even a small surplus, $25 a week, 50, whatever survives the month, knowing the system is worth 6 figures over a lifetime. The tragedy isn't only that some people can't cross the line, it's that so many people who could, don't, simply because nobody ever showed them where it was. And that's genuinely why I do this. If you want to go one step further and build a surplus that doesn't depend on your job at all, I run a school community where I break down exactly how to create and scale a faceless YouTube channel from zero, using everything I've learned across more than 10 successful channels. That's how a lot of people manufacture the surplus this whole video depends on. It's free, the link is in the description, and I'll walk you through it step by step. Greg could have. Same salary as Grace, same cushion, same decade. He had the surplus. What he didn't have was the 20-minute afternoon and the one decision that turned his puddle into a river. That's the whole gap between them. Not income, not luck, not a secret, just a line and the choice to step over it. And Greg was never the villain here. Greg is just the version of you that keeps doing the responsible looking thing that quietly loses. The good news is you get to decide which one you become, and you get to decide it today. So here's the question worth sitting with long after this video ends. Look at your own money right now, not what you earn, what you're doing with what's already there. Is it working, or is it just sitting at the edge of the line, waiting for permission you were always allowed to give it? Cross the line. Everything else is just steps. If you want the full free walkthrough on building an income stream of your own, our school community is waiting for you. Links in the description. And quick reminder, I'm not a financial advisor. This video is for educational purposes only, and what happens next depends entirely on your own decisions. I'll see you in the next one.